At my graduation party, my mom raised her glass and said, "Let's toast to the child who actually made us proud," while staring straight at my sister. I was the one who paid for everything. I just nodded, excused myself, and transferred the house back into my name while they were still cutting the cake. I, 24M, stared at the graduation cap sitting on my kitchen counter, the tassel still perfectly straight. Tomorrow would be the party celebrating my computer science degree, the one I'd worked 4 years to earn while juggling 2 part-time jobs. The house around me felt different now that the deed was officially in my name again, a gift I'd given my parents when I turned 18, back when I thought family meant unconditional support. My phone buzzed with another text from Mom asking about catering arrangements. I'd covered everything: the venue rental at the community center, decorations, food for 60 people, even the photographer she insisted we needed. The total sat somewhere north of $3,000, money I'd saved from my internship at a tech startup downtown. My sister hadn't contributed a cent, but then again, she never did. The next evening arrived with that suffocating suburban energy that comes with family gatherings. Relatives I barely spoke to filled the rented hall, picking at the expensive hors d'oeuvres while congratulating me with half-hearted handshakes. My graduation photos lined the walls, but somehow my sister managed to photobomb half of them with her perfectly practiced smile. I found myself gravitating toward my uncle, the only family member who'd actually asked about my thesis project. He seemed genuinely interested when I explained my research on machine learning applications, nodding along as I described the algorithms I'd developed. For a moment, I forgot about the growing knot in my stomach. My parents worked the room like seasoned politicians. Mom in her new dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Dad glad-handing neighbors he usually complained about. They moved with the confidence of people celebrating their achievement, not their sons. The distinction felt sharper every time someone complimented them on raising such a successful kid. The cake arrived precisely at 8, a towering 3-layer creation decorated with my university colors. Everyone gathered around as the photographer positioned himself for the perfect shot. My parents flanked me, their hands on my shoulders in that universal pose of proud family moments. The weight of their touch felt heavier than it should have. Mom cleared her throat and reached for her wine glass, the room quieting as people sensed a speech coming. My sister appeared beside her as if summoned, that same practiced smile spreading across her face. The photographer's camera flashed, capturing what would look like a perfect family moment to anyone scrolling through the photos later. What happened next carved itself into my memory with surgical precision. Mom raised her glass higher, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted everyone's attention. She thanked everyone for coming, mentioned how proud she was of our family's achievements, then delivered the words that changed everything. She proposed a toast to the child who actually made them proud, her eyes locked on my sister the entire time. Not a glance in my direction, not even an acknowledgement that I existed in that moment. The room erupted in confused applause as people looked between my sister and me, trying to understand the dynamic they'd just witnessed. My sister basked in the attention, raising her own glass with practiced grace. She'd perfected this role over the years, the golden child who could do no wrong despite dropping out of college twice and currently living in my parents' basement while pursuing her latest creative endeavor. The applause continued, and I realized most of these people had no idea what was actually happening. The photographer kept clicking away, capturing my parents' beaming faces and my sister's triumphant pose. I stood there holding my untouched cake plate, the graduate whose achievement had just been publicly dismissed at his own celebration. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd paid for every moment of this humiliation. I managed what I hoped looked like a gracious nod, the kind of response that wouldn't create a scene or give the relatives something to gossip about later. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand, but I excused myself with some mumbled comment about needing air. Nobody seemed to notice my departure. They were too busy congratulating my sister on whatever she'd supposedly accomplished. The bathroom became my refuge, a temporary escape from the sound of celebration that had nothing to do with me. I pulled out my phone and opened the real estate app where I'd been monitoring property transfers. The house my parents lived in, the one I'd gifted them 6 years ago when I received my inheritance from my grandfather, appeared in the search results under my name. Transferring property back to yourself turns out to be surprisingly straightforward when you're the legal owner. My grandfather had been specific in his will. The house went to me, not my parents, though I'd been too young and naive to understand the implications. I'd signed it over to them at 18, thinking it was the right thing to do, the generous gesture that would prove my worth as their son. The digital paperwork took exactly 12 minutes to complete. County records would be updated within 24 hours, making me the sole owner of the house where my parents had lived rent-free for the past 6 years. The same house where my sister currently resided in the basement, treating it like her personal art studio and storage unit for her various failed ventures. I returned to the party as they were cutting the cake, slipping back into the crowd like nothing had changed. My parents continued playing host. My sister continued accepting congratulations for achievements nobody could quite identify, and I continued existing in the space between their expectations and reality. The evening dragged on with painful predictability. Relatives asked about my job prospects, assuming someone with my degree would naturally find success in tech. I provided the expected answers while mentally calculating how much this party had cost per minute of genuine acknowledgement I'd received. The math didn't work in my favor. My parents seemed genuinely surprised when I announced my early departure around 10. They were deep in conversation with my aunt about my sister's latest plan to start a jewelry business, the fourth entrepreneurial venture they'd enthusiastically supported in the past 2 years. The fact that I'd funded this entire evening had apparently escaped their immediate memory. The drive home felt longer than usual, my graduation cap sliding around the passenger seat with every turn. I'd worked construction summers to pay for school, studied while my classmates partied, maintained a nearly perfect GPA while juggling responsibilities that most students never faced. The diploma in my back seat represented 4 years of sacrifice that had been dismissed with a single toast. Update 1. The notification arrived at 6:47 a.m. the next morning. The county registrar's office had processed the property transfer, and my parents' house was officially mine again. I screenshot the confirmation email and set it aside, knowing I'd need it for the conversation that was inevitably coming. My phone started ringing around 9. Mom's contact photo filled the screen. A selfie from last Christmas where she was wearing the expensive jewelry my sister had somehow convinced her to buy from one of her business attempts. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to her confused message about receiving some kind of legal notice in their morning mail. The second call came from Dad 10 minutes later. His voice carried that edge it got when he was trying to solve a problem he didn't fully understand. He asked if I knew anything about paperwork regarding their house, mentioning that the county had sent some kind of ownership notification. The confusion in his voice almost made me feel guilty. Almost. I drove over around noon, finding both my parents sitting at their kitchen table with the official documents spread between them like evidence of a crime they couldn't quite identify. My sister was nowhere to be seen, probably still sleeping off whatever she'd been doing the night before. The basement stairs creaked occasionally, confirming she was down there, but avoiding the family drama brewing upstairs. Dad looked up when I walked in, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he studied the legal language. He asked me to explain what these papers meant, why the county was telling them the house was in my name. The genuine confusion on his face reminded me of how I'd felt 6 years ago when I'd first inherited the property, overwhelmed by legal concepts I didn't fully grasp. I sat down across from them and explained the situation as simply as possible. The house had been mine since I turned 18, inherited from Grandpa's estate. I'd transferred it to them as a gift, thinking it was the right thing to do. Now I'd transferred it back to myself, which was entirely legal since I was the original heir. The county was just updating their records to reflect the change in ownership. Mom's expression shifted through several phases: confusion, realization, then something approaching panic. She asked why I would do such a thing, what had prompted this sudden change. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications none of us wanted to address directly. I could have mentioned the graduation party, the toast that had publicly humiliated me in front of our entire extended family. I could have brought up years of watching my sister receive praise for minimal effort while my achievements went largely unnoticed. Instead, I focused on practical matters. I explained that I was 24 now, establishing my career, and needed to think about my financial future. Owning property was part of building wealth, something my computer science professors had emphasized during our career planning seminars. The house represented security, a foundation I could build on as I entered the professional world. Dad wanted to know what this meant for them practically. Would they need to find somewhere else to live? Were we talking about rent payments? How much time did they have to make arrangements? His questions revealed how completely they'd forgotten that their housing situation had always depended on my generosity. I assured them nothing would change immediately. They could continue living there while we figured out a long-term arrangement. Maybe we could work out a rental agreement, something fair based on local market rates. I wasn't trying to displace them, just reestablishing the actual ownership structure that had always existed legally. My sister finally appeared during this conversation, emerging from the basement in pajamas and yesterday's makeup. She immediately demanded to know what was happening, why everyone looked so serious. When Dad explained the situation, her reaction was exactly what I'd expected, immediate outrage that I would dare disrupt her living arrangements. She accused me of being vindictive and petty, asking what had gotten into me suddenly. The irony of her questioning my motives while contributing nothing to household expenses wasn't lost on me, but I kept my response measured. I simply repeated that I was taking control of an asset that had always been legally mine. Update 2. The family group chat exploded over the next few days. Screenshots of legal documents, confused questions from relatives who'd heard fragments of the story, and increasingly dramatic messages from my sister about the unfairness of the situation. I muted the notifications and focused on work, letting them process the new reality without my constant involvement. My sister tried calling me directly on Thursday, probably after realizing that her usual tactics weren't working on Mom and Dad. She wanted to meet for lunch to discuss the situation like adults, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she used when she needed something. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near campus, neutral territory where we could talk without parental mediation. She arrived 15 minutes late, a power play I recognized from years of family dynamics. Her outfit was carefully chosen to project maturity and responsibility, business casual clothes that probably came from the allowance my parents still provided despite her being 26. She ordered an elaborate drink that cost more than my usual coffee budget for a week. Her opening argument focused on family loyalty and the importance of maintaining stability for our parents. She painted my decision as unnecessarily cruel, disrupting their sense of security for reasons she couldn't understand. The performance was polished, the kind of emotional manipulation she'd perfected over years of getting her way through guilt and drama. I listened without interrupting, watching her work through talking points she'd obviously rehearsed. When she finished, I asked a simple question. How much had she contributed to the household expenses over the past year? The silence that followed answered everything. She tried to deflect, talking about emotional support and helping Mom with various projects around the house. I pressed for specifics: utility bills, property taxes, maintenance costs, groceries. Her contribution amounted to occasionally picking up takeout when she felt like it, usually using money she'd borrowed from our parents. The conversation shifted when I mentioned the graduation party. Her face changed when I brought up the toast, the moment that had crystallized years of accumulated resentment. She tried to minimize it, claiming Mom had just been excited about her new business plan, that the timing was coincidental. The explanation felt hollow even as she delivered it. I pulled out my phone and showed her the receipts from the party, every vendor payment, every deposit, the final bill that had consumed most of my savings from my internship. $3,000 to celebrate an achievement that had been publicly dismissed in favor of her theoretical future success. The numbers spoke louder than any argument I could have made. Her response revealed everything about our family dynamic. She suggested that paying for the party was my choice, that nobody had forced me to be so extravagant. The fact that I could afford it proved I was doing fine financially and didn't need to take the house back from our parents. My success, in her view, obligated me to support the family's lifestyle. I realized we were speaking different languages. In her world, my achievements were family resources to be shared and managed by others. In my world, they were personal accomplishments that deserved recognition and respect. The gap between these perspectives couldn't be bridged by a single conversation over overpriced coffee. The meeting ended with her promising to talk to our parents about a reasonable rental arrangement. She seemed to think this was a negotiation where compromise was possible, that I might be satisfied with some token acknowledgement of my ownership. She hadn't grasped that this wasn't about money. It was about establishing boundaries that should have existed all along. Update 3. 2 weeks later, I received a formal letter from a lawyer my parents had consulted. The legal language was intimidating, full of terms like undue influence and family obligation. But the core message was simple. They wanted to challenge the property transfer and establish some kind of legal claim to continued occupancy. I forwarded the letter to my own attorney, a real estate specialist I'd found through my university's career services. She reviewed the case and delivered straightforward advice. My position was legally solid, but family disputes could get messy regardless of legal merit. She recommended documenting everything and preparing for a potentially lengthy process. The lawyer consultation revealed how seriously my parents were taking this situation. They'd moved beyond confusion and hurt feelings to active resistance, probably encouraged by my sister's version of events. The fact that they were willing to spend money on legal fees while simultaneously claiming financial hardship showed how distorted their priorities had become. My sister's social media told a different story than the one being presented to lawyers. Her Instagram featured regular posts from expensive restaurants, shopping trips, and weekend getaways funded by sources that remain mysterious. The jewelry business she'd mentioned at my graduation party had apparently evolved into a lifestyle brand that existed primarily in her promotional posts. I started keeping detailed records of every interaction with my family, every text message and voicemail and email. My attorney had emphasized the importance of documentation, especially if they were planning to claim I was somehow coercing them or acting against their interests. The paper trail would tell the real story if this situation escalated further. The house itself became a symbol of everything wrong with our family dynamic. Built by my grandfather's hard work and sacrifice, left to me with the intention of providing security and foundation for my future, it had instead become a tool for enabling my sister's perpetual adolescence and my parents' delusions about their financial situation. 3 months after my graduation party, I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of continuing the legal battle or working out a rental arrangement, I decided to sell the house entirely. The proceeds would give me genuine financial independence, enough to start my career without the burden of managing family drama disguised as property management. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, my phone was ringing constantly with family members demanding explanations, threatening interventions, promising consequences I'd supposedly regret. I listened to each voicemail exactly once, then deleted them without responding. My parents found temporary housing with my aunt, cramming their belongings into a spare bedroom while they figured out their next move. My sister bounced between friends' couches, posting increasingly dramatic social media updates about family betrayal and unexpected hardships. The sympathy she received from people who didn't know the full story seemed to sustain her through the transition. The house sold within 6 weeks to a young family who saw the same potential my grandfather had recognized decades earlier. The closing process felt like shedding weight I hadn't realized I was carrying, legal documents that transferred not just ownership, but responsibility for managing other people's poor decisions. I used part of the proceeds to pay off my student loans completely, eliminating debt that would have followed me for years. The remainder went into investments and savings, building the foundation my grandfather had intended the house to provide. For the first time since turning 18, my financial decisions were mine alone to make. The family relationships didn't recover, but I'd stopped expecting them to. Holiday invitations became rare, then stopped entirely. Extended relatives chose sides based on incomplete information, mostly siding with my parents and sister because their version of events painted me as the villain who destroyed family stability for selfish reasons. 6 months later, I accepted a job offer from a tech company in another state. The salary exceeded my expectations, and the signing bonus covered moving expenses with money left over for furnishing a new apartment. Starting fresh in a place where nobody knew my history felt like the graduation gift I'd never received. My new colleagues knew me as someone who'd worked hard to earn his degree and landed a competitive position through merit and determination. They had no context for the family drama that had shaped my early 20s, no reason to question my worth or minimize my achievements. The respect I'd always sought from my family existed naturally in professional relationships based on competence rather than obligation. The last text from my sister arrived on my birthday, exactly 1 year after the graduation party that had changed everything. She asked if I was happy with the choices I'd made, if destroying our family had been worth proving whatever point I'd been trying to make. I read it twice. then blocked her number without responding. I was happy, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't been while trying to earn approval that would never come. The house was gone, the family relationships were over, but the freedom to build my own life without interference or guilt felt like the real graduation gift I'd given myself.